Yes, hello. This morning, the day of the full moon, I was suddenly inspired to talk a little bit about something that I was thinking about putting off for a while, but and for some reason it just came up for me recently, and I thought I would talk about it. So when you come over to this idea of like esoteric study or what have you, and learning the lore of the situation, learning the facts, if you will, there's also the complementary aspect of clairvoyant training per se. Now, learning like genuine esoteric lore is actually a type of clairvoyant training. It's still like uh, builds up your etheric body and other things in such a way that it complements training such as meditation. It basically falls under the general branch of contemplation, um, which is sort of like a long brooding kind of meditation over the course of the day where you just sort of muse on it, think about it, bring in different archetypes. I mean, it's the way that I think most people are comfortable with, and that's why this is a very appealing method, because it's just you're engaging with something you normally already do. You sort of like read about something scientifically and then think about it, try to put the pieces together, imagine the scenario, run little tests in your mind. That's something that people are used to doing. They're less used to like sitting in a dark room and just trying to shut out all other thoughts or whatever. So for a lot of people, this is a great way to get into a degree of occult training without occult training, if you will. Although this is not easy. In some ways, meditating is easier than doing this, because this is like a scholastic kind of thing, and it requires, study. Meditation is not a study in any of that sense. Like, you can do it anywhere at any time with just yourself. This is not like that. Like, you need the information. I mean, once you have it, then you can contemplate by yourself. It becomes synonymous. But that initial outward study is necessary. But that's neither here nor there. I was only mentioning it because it is complementary to esoteric training, right? Which is going through the process of awakening your higher senses, as Steiner would call them. These are things that everybody has, everyone. They're at different stages of like advancement and awakening, because it's a rainbow. Everything, there's a spectrum. High level initiates, people that have a ways to go, but it's not like a race. Like you're not like, your individual journey is important for the speed that it takes. Like, people that are ahead of you are only there in order to help the people behind. That's the only way that this works. And so, like, you have to put aside any idea that you are being called to this for anything other than service. This type of training will not bestow any kind of ability unless it is essentially a fait accompli that you will be using it in non terrible ways. It's pretty much like a self sealed system or whatever. But it's interesting because I think I've mentioned this before. Uh, Especially when you're getting started on this path, and you start to realize that, like, oh wait, all of this stuff is actually true, and Steiner is just trying to tell us what the hell is actually going on. And then when you realize that, like, oh, I can actually trust this guy, then you start looking over at his little manual on clairvoyance training, and you're like, okay, wait, so you're saying I can literally like train myself to see these things myself. And because that is sort of the method of the day, you are a scientist. That's why you're here in a certain sense. Like, you want to observe these things scientifically yourself. You want to be objective. You're like, I want to see these things. I want to draw conclusions. And it's like, yeah, of course you do. Yes, that is the style. But that's not really how clairvoyance works. It's not a sense that's acquired in like a pedantic way. It only comes online when certain like inner and outer conditions are met, and karma is still a factor, even though grace, which I won't go into, is a huge part of it as well. It's not a predictable thing. And so for some people, weirdly, it can happen really quickly, where they just have to practice for a very short time and stuff starts waking up. For others, like in my case, for example, years and years might be required, which still, on the whole, is not really a long time, considering how long that humans learn, like live and learn, right? It would take you, many years to master any skill. So why you would think that practicing, psychic abilities would be any different, it wouldn't be. But everybody's just at a different place, and you have to respect that, and you have to respect yourself in your own process. But that does mean that in many cases, you will have to be extraordinarily patient, much more patient than you've been with anything else in your life, because these things only evolve on their own schedule. They do not care about convenience or what you want or what you wish or your dear. It's something that You knock, you seek, right? You pray, you seek, you knock, and then at some point you will be answered. Like you will be answered, but no one can know that time and place or whatever. And of course, it's just it's sort of like invoking synchronicity almost. So clairvoyant training, right? It seems weird, especially if you're like a skeptical person where you're like, what are you? This is so incredibly far out there, right? And it's so funny because it's really not at all. It's incredibly like practical and straightforward. It makes perfectly good sense, and even like a rudimentary understanding of like Eastern meditation practices will pretty much like put you in good stead to start digging into this stuff. Um, it's just that you would, as a prerequisite, you would have to believe that it was possible. If you don't believe that it's possible that people have these abilities, like if you don't believe that humans are out of a divine line and hence like have certain inbuilt faculties that can be awakened, like if you don't believe that, I don't see how you can earnestly engage with this because it is not going to prove anything to you. Like everything else in anthroposophy, you will have to prove it to your own satisfaction, whatever that means to you, and that is available to you with enough effort and enough just enthusiasm. But you know, I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were talking about this concept of like faking it till you make it, right? And she had a better idea. She was like, it's more like faith it till you make it, and that's really much more true. Um, there, for me personally, my belief in the efficacy of these things comes from a twofold place. One, because I understand Eastern meditation practices and the theory behind them, and the tremendous achievements, you know, like the West may think that only physical matter exists, but like monks have been studying like phenomenology directly using meditative techniques for like thousands of years. So I tend to think that they have something important to say. Yeah, you can take it with a grain of salt. There is a religious context and like there are archetypes and such that make it, highly interpretable. Um, but in addition to that, just the fact that I trusted Steiner, that I listened to enough of his lectures, I thought about them enough where I'm like, okay, actually, this guy seems to really have some incredible insight into not only outer phenomena, but things that are happening inside me, things that he couldn't possibly know unless he knew. Couldn't fake it, couldn't make it up. So when you have to have enough of a basis to enthusiastically try these things and then also be prepared to fail over and over and over again, because that is a test of resolve, faith, will, whatever you like. It's all about will. It's all about rhythmically coming back to these practices. Now, it's so funny because you would assume probably that it's like, oh well, training for this stuff, it's probably like really rigorous and intense and you have to practice for hours a day and like you can't see your family and stuff. It's like, well, no. I mean, technically that would be true if you were maybe joining some kind of monastery. But this whole method, this whole thing that Steiner has come up with, this Rosicrucian method, is designed to be integrated seamlessly into your regular life. You don't have to do anything differently. In fact, no one will probably even know that you've begun forging an esoteric path in life. All they'll notice is that you'll just be more calm, more collected, friendlier, sweeter, just a better person slowly over time as this inner practice starts to manifest in an outward way. But the point is, Steiner basically says, start with 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day. It sounds so simple, and I mean it is, but that doesn't make it easy because it is the absolute commitment to rhythmic repetition, to never ever sacrifice, to make this the center point of your day. Just 5 minutes of inner peace, contemplation. There's different exercises that he talks about, but that's beside the point. Just in general, 5 minutes to create a spiritual center in your whole day, in your week, your month, your life, built in structurally, rhythmically. That is the beginning of everything. That's what creates the space for this development. Until you actually are able to create space for it, it has nowhere to get in. Your karma and your life is like, it got a grip on you. You have to create space for yourself, and a practice is how you would do that. And so, and like I was saying, this is complementary to study and whatnot. So it's like very simple principles. There's nothing particularly strange about it. Steiner gives exercises that you just have to do over and over again. Feeling exercises, thought exercises, will exercises. Very rudimentary stuff, which is often, I think, why people turn away quite quickly. They're just like, well, what is this? This doesn't seem like secret wisdom or whatever. But of course, that's the wonderfulness about this exoteric type stuff, or about occultism in a sense, right? It's just it's people have to be able to see the wisdom in the thing to engage with it. The people that don't see it won't engage with it. So I don't actually have How to Know Higher Worlds on me. It's around here somewhere, but it's a book that I come back to repeatedly. And as I said, like at the start, when you're like me or you're really enthusiastic about Steiner and wanting to learn to see this stuff for yourself, you often make it like a real priority to get into this. And then it takes a long time and you start burning out. You're like, oh, never mind. You kind of put it aside and you go back. But the thing about this type of study that's so intriguing is that like clairvoyance really doesn't matter very much at all. It's like I was saying before, you would be given clairvoyance only if it was determined that you seeing something clairvoyantly would be useful to everybody else in some way. And even until you're morally ready to accept that, you won't have it. But clairvoyance is not necessary to reap tremendous benefits from this kind of practice. You know, enhanced intuition, like calmness, inner strength, better judgment, quicker judgment. Like you will absolutely notice extremely helpful effects from doing these things that may not necessarily be like full-blown clairvoyance. But the surety which you can step through life and like the accommodations you can make, the adaptability that you will have, like you will notice strong, useful effects from a meditative practice. And you will be so grateful for them and so living in that reality that you'll kind of forget all about clairvoyance for a long ass time because you don't need it, not for your life, right? And this is the thing that is hard to understand because clairvoyance is not something that can be arbitrarily obtained, but only obtained at the proper time, and you have to have made yourself ready and continue to make yourself ready. So yeah, and it's just it sounds very woo-woo when you're stuck into a materialistic scientific mindset, but I mean, if you have any other reference points of like spiritual authority that aren't just like, shouting from the pulpit, again, monks, right? These are inner scientists. They can be trusted. They're not enslaved to dogma. They don't have political aims. They're spiritual researchers. And yes, of course, there's deception and corruption and stuff there too. It's the same thing with regular science. It exists in spiritual science as well. It's not a perfect endeavor, obviously. Perhaps even less so in a certain sense, although at least we can be fucking honest about that. But yeah, it's like there is reason to think that there is more than what science presents, and that you as a human being are going to have to forge your own path to understand this, because it just can't be handed to you on a silver platter. Everything about this, everything about occultism requires you to make an effort to go out and meet the information. The truth is not going to be handed to you. You must seek it out. You must put yourself forward. You have to create that vessel in which it can be invested or poured or whatever you want to call it. So this is just an overview. I mean, we'll talk about specific techniques and different things, but just, if this is something that interests you, I would urge you to just pick up a copy of that book, How to Know Higher Worlds by Rudolf Steiner, or you could even go something a little bit more direct like this, right? I only got this relatively recently. This is the Clear Vision School, and this is basically like based off of people doing more research to like solidify and like explicitly like suss out the methods implied by How to Know Higher Worlds. I mean, like Steiner gives you the overview, but you kind of have to like hack the exact processes yourself. Whereas with Awakening the Third Eye, with these clear vision things, they try to make it very methodical. Like, do this, think this, visualize this, right? It works. It's actually like probably a little bit better for people who want to be a little bit more rigorous, a little more systematic. Steiner requires a little more engagement of like your own imagination and wherewithal, so it may appeal to certain people and not to other people. But there are other things in the line of like Rosicrucianism, like this clear vision stuff. And the exercises in here are really super useful, and they do work, et cetera, et cetera. And there's good things about like grounding yourself and protecting from psychic attacks. Like really, stuff that for Steiner would simply have come as a result of your initiation, right? Like right hand path will keep you safe no matter what, and that's true for clear vision too. But they're just a little bit more explicit about it, and I think some people would appreciate the like just more rigorous kind of, and not that Steiner wasn't rigorous, but it's again, this man was doing everything by himself. I mean, he had to help, but you never hear about it. Yeah, so I guess that's it. Again, we'll get into specifics later, but I just thought that maybe today would be a good day for an overview. So I hope that you enjoyed it, questions and comments and so forth, I would appreciate. And happy full moon.